welcome back to my channel. My name is Ella and I have a new series for you, which is something along the lines called of Ella, how do I? And then today we've got Start Witchcraft. So how do you start witchcraft if you're completely new? I'm going to go over my top tips for you. My biggest tip is going to be right at the end of this video, so definitely stay until then. And yeah, let's get right into it. So the basic idea of this kind of series is just, I would have loved to have someone to ask these kind of questions starting out on my practice. You know, I started 15 years ago this year actually with my witchcraft practice, and I only had books. I didn't really have someone to mentor me. My family was spiritual, but not in that sort of realm, and so I would have just loved having someone to help me out with a lot of these questions. So this is that. So what we're going to be doing is you leave your questions in the comments, and the most upvoted video is going to be the next video. I also feel like this is going to be a really nice one for fostering community and just helping each other out a little bit more. So I would love for you to also engage more in the comments with this video and just leave your own tips as well, and we can just all add a little bit of our own experience or our own thoughts, and hopefully this will help some newbies out, or you know, be interesting to some of you. The first tip is going to be what draws you to witchcraft, and to write that down. Now, first of all, it's going to be a great look into your own personal journey. Once you are a little bit further along the path, you can look back on this, and it's just a nice memory to have a look at and compare. But the biggest thing I feel like is when you actually explain what draws you to witchcraft, that can be like a guide, that can be something that you can look at and feel again inspired by, especially if you're feeling a little lost. You can go back on that and say, okay, I really am inspired by, or I'm really into the more crafting side of like herbalism within witchcraft, or I'm really much more interested into the death aspect of some witchcraft practices. I'm really much more interested in reconnecting with folk practices of my culture. So something like that is going to give you a little bit of a starting point. So have a look, write it down, just take a day to journal those ideas and to journal those initial thoughts, and it'll give you a starting point. My second tip for starting your practice or your witchcraft journey is to connect with nature. I feel like this seems like a common sense one. However, I think the more we're on social media, sometimes we lose touch with nature, and sometimes we need to just touch some grass. And so I think having that connection to nature is actually going to be trivial in your practice for two reasons. So when we think supernatural or witchcraft being supernatural, I think sometimes that removes nature from our viewpoint. But in all honesty, I feel like nature and the more animistic forces in nature are going to be your first spiritual experience. And I think when you're starting out, having a spiritual experience is a lot of times what people are seeking, even if they're not quite conscious of that. But if you actually go out into a forest or even just a park, and you just sit by a tree and you try and take it all in and actually feel. Now, if you actually have that sense or that feeling come through, that's going to be your first ever spiritual experience, and I think that is incredibly important. Now, the next thing is actually building relationships with nature. A lot of witchcraft is going to be working with spirits and having a relationship with spirits. And I know spirits kind of sounds like a scary term, but your houseplant can be your spirit ally. And if you start seeing these spirits as everywhere around you, instead of, oh, this is just, you know, rosemary is a herb, I'm just using that as an ingredient, and instead you're starting to work with the spirit of rosemary to help in your work, that's going to really elevate your practice. And so having and building a relationship with spirits, especially local spirits, is going to become such a force in your practice, and they can become teachers. Now, if you, for example, take the time, and witchcraft does require time and effort, then you can go into the park or into the forest or your local garden, for example, or even your own backyard if you have one, and connect with the spirits right there and see what you feel. Write those things down again, see how, you know, you interact with these spirits, and then you can build that relationship up, you know, and you become more familiar with them, and with time you're going to really be able to learn from them, and they will become your mentors and your teachers. Of course, we have to understand what witchcraft even is. I didn't put this as my first tip just because I felt like the other tips, in my opinion, are more prevalent long term. I feel like what witchcraft is going to come naturally, and it's going to also change with time for you. So I like to have one of those. So have a thought experiment, or just write down what witchcraft is to you, what does it mean to you, and what called you in to become a witch or to practice witchcraft. And honestly, I know a lot of times people, and honestly this happens every single time. It happened in the 90s, it happened in the early 2000s, and it's going to happen time and time again. People are going to be drawn in by the aesthetics. And to be honest, the divine is beautiful. A lot of churches and temples and mosques and mosques are beautiful for a reason. The divine is beautiful. Nature is beautiful. And even if it's, sometimes gruesome, it still is beautiful in that way. And I think that is true for witchcraft as well. A lot of people are drawn to it for how it looks and how it appears. And I mean, I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with that either. For some people, witchcraft means empowerment and taking control over your life. For some people, it means reconnecting with nature or reconnecting with practices from your family. For some people, it just is some kind of allure that they cannot really explain. They are just drawn to it. Figure out what it means to you, and of course, research the history of witchcraft. Now, this is going to be something that is going to probably take up your entire, life. So don't get too caught up in trying to research all of witchcraft all at once. You're not going to be able to. There is so much history, right? Like, it's like trying to say, research the human history. Like, witchcraft and animism are intrinsically tied to human nature. It's going to take years, most likely, to really fully understand it, and it's going to shift and change with time. So don't worry too much about it, as long as you kind of get a basic understanding of what witchcraft is and how it's kind of, the thread throughout history and the major events and things like that. That's a good one to just have a basic understanding of, or a basic foundation of, that you can then work on or rebuild and learn more with time. My next tip is to actually look at your daily practices, because I promise you already practice witchcraft. So this might be a little bit of a like, moment, I'm not practicing witchcraft. Yes, you are. A lot of us already grow up with magic. We just don't realize that that is what it is. We grow up with fairy tales, we grew up with folk practices, we grew up with superstitions, and just little things here and there that a lot of us don't recognize as witchcraft. But it can be that, especially if you're entering the intention into it. That's a lot of times what it is about, right? So of course you can do these things daily and never recognize them as witchcraft. But once you recognize that it is witchcraft and you do them intentionally, that is what makes it witchcraft, in my opinion at least. So if you have a look at your daily practices, are there any things that you do every day? For example, when you enter your house, do you greet your house? Do you say thank you to your house? Do you already have a wall full of pictures with your ancestors that you acknowledge? Or maybe you have a prayer that you say. Perhaps when you cook food, do you intentionally use ingredients? Do you little things like that. Do you knock on wood? Do you have a horseshoe above your door for good fortune? Things like that can be seen as folk practices, and they are going to be something that you're going to be able to really reconnect with. Now, I think that research these practices. We are really already truly raised with magic across the globe. Every culture and every country have their own practices and folk practices and little things that they do. Now, I want you to research those. I want you to actually have a look at your region and the history and the folk practices of your region. You can literally do this just by typing in your region and then folk practices or customs, or just, tales, fairy tales, and then see what comes up. This is going to also create a more conscious practice, because you are actually going to be not just blindly stepping through and stumbling through the forest next time, but you're going to be able to consciously know, oh, this happened here and that's what happened there, and it's going to really add to your practice and give you a starting point once again. And of course, a big one is going to be, don't be afraid to make mistakes. Human nature is going to, we make mistakes all the time. That's how we learn. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. I think You assume with witchcraft you have to be careful. So many things could go wrong. In all honesty, nothing's really horrible going to happen by making a little minor mistake here and there, generally speaking. It's going to be natural to make mistakes. Most advanced practitioners still make mistakes here and there. It's normal. Don't be afraid to get into it because you're afraid of mistakes. Instead, see them as teaching lessons or as learning curve. And this is already going into my next tip, is don't be afraid to try out magic. Get yourself a little tarot card deck, and just practice your intuition. Go into nature and try communicating with the spirits there. Try to reach out and just get a feel for it. Now, I also think that it's really important to figure out a path when you are trying to get into witchcraft. That's just going to narrow down what you want to research and what you want to focus on. It's going to, once again, give you a starting point. So go have a look at what path you would want to practice in my next video. So my next video is going to be all about different paths and what path might be suitable for you, so that you can really try and get a head start at and figure out what to do next. And my biggest tip is, and if you've made it here, thank you, my biggest tip is going to be community. I think especially with the books on solitary practitioners that came out 10, 20, 30 years ago, we've been so removed from community, but I feel like community, now that we have social media and we've got witchcraft all over social media, community is much more accessible, and it's going to be so amazing for you to make friends, witchy friends, and have a community that supports you, that you can ask questions to, that you just don't feel as lonely, and that you can be inspired by. You can do some brainstorming together, you can ask for tips, or you can ask for book recommendations and things like that. It's going to really help you solidify your practice, and just, I think humans always have needed community to get ahead, and I think that is very true for witchcraft as well. So have a look for community. I do have a Discord server as well as a Patreon, which if you want to join a community, that I obviously would recommend. The Discord server is for free, and the Patreon starts as low as $3 a month. So have a look for that. It's going to really elevate your practice and make you feel like there's just people around you. You're not on this by yourself. You're not treading through, the trenches by yourself. You've got a community to help you and uplift you. So that's already it for this video. Of course, do check out the next video, which is going to be finding a path for you in your practice. And of course, I have all of my social media contacts linked in the description box below. I have my Patreon, my Discord, our podcast, and of course my book is going to be linked over there as well. And my book is actually, in my opinion, a really, really great one and suitable for a beginner. If you've never touched witchcraft before, I highly recommend it. That's kind of what I had in mind writing it, to be suitable for that and advanced practitioners. It's going to really build up and help you become a more advanced practitioner. But yeah, I thank you all for watching this video. Let me know what you would like to see next, what your questions are, and then everyone can go upvote those, and that'll be the next video after the path video, of course. So thank you, and may you go with your gods. Bye.